Today on Investigate TV Plus, a mother killed by a teenage intruder, and a family claims a broken system failed to keep him locked up.
We were just appalled that they send this child home that had committed murder and they just let him go home with no conditions on his release. He just went home.
How their fight for justice exposes a nationwide crisis.
And I just hope to be able to save another family from this heartache and from having to be re-traumatized.
Plus, we uncover gaps in tracking juvenile escapees across the country.
Then battling algae blooms that could impact water supplies.
That's something we have control of. We could prevent these blooms if we really wanted to.
10 years after toxic algae left 500,000 people without drinking water, we uncover what's been done to prevent outbreaks and why the threat still persists.
And a basketball coach refused to let failing vision steal her dreams. How a gift from a stranger kept her from being sidelined.
I'm gaining a second chance, so I am eternally grateful.
In-depth stories that inform and inspire. You're watching Investigate TV Plus. Juveniles accused and convicted of serious crimes are escaping detention facilities across the country. I'm Lee Zurich.
And I'm Tisha Powell. Experts say rehabilitation is important for those minors, but security cannot take a back seat.
Investigative reporter Chris Nakamoto uncovers gaps in tracking escapees and explains how part of the public safety problem is a lack of uniform security protocols nationwide.
Mom was complicated. She was a very good lady. You know, I grew up with my mom she was a single mom. She worked very hard to take care of me, and I was the only child. And so sometimes our relationship was really strained because of that. But I always knew that she loved me, no matter what. Every year we typically had a New Year's Eve party. So of course we were planning because it was the day before New Year's Eve. And we had made food, we had cleaned the house, and it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and we were going to bed. And we didn't think anything with the phone ringing. And it was my stepdad's granddaughters. So it was an odd phone call, and they said, "We needed to let you know that something happened at your mom's house. There was an intruder. And all we know is that someone has been shot."
Becky Everton's mom, Angela Heyman, heard a noise under the carport of her Baton Rouge home. When she went to check it out, she was met by a 15-year-old gun-toting juvenile, Xavier Cade. Investigators believe Cade got spooked and shot Heyman. She died at the scene. Her husband, who heard the commotion, grabbed a gun and fired back, shooting Cade in the abdomen. The juvenile shooter went to the hospital, and when he was released a week later, he was booked into this juvenile detention facility, but not for long. Our national investigative team uncovered court records typically kept secret involving Cade's juvenile criminal history. That file shows Cade spent 6 months in juvenile lockup following the killing until his parents posted bond in July 2020.
We were just appalled that they send this child home that had committed murder and they just let him go home with no conditions on his release. He just went home.
The following month, Cade's mom texted his social worker saying he disappeared. He's outfitted with an ankle monitor, but that didn't stop his criminal behavior. Months after getting that monitor, he stole a car in December of 2020. 2 months pass and more trouble. He removed his ankle bracelet and disappeared again. In May, prosecutors petitioned to get his bond revoked after Cade gets caught trying to buy a gun. Prosecutors say the ankle monitor tracking him was dead. Law enforcement sent him back to juvenile detention. But Cade had no plans of staying locked up. In October, he and 4 other juveniles violently attacked 3 guards and escaped in one of the guards' vehicles.
Like, this is crazy. What is happening here? And why is it this person who murdered not adequately being held? There's a problem here.
Cade's mother eventually turned him back in. In January of 2022, he was moved to an adult jail and later pled guilty to manslaughter, getting 25 years for killing Angela Heyman. Everton's issues are not unique. It's happened in Virginia.
This was a very elaborate plan. It first started with choking out a prison guard.
Tennessee.
Some youth escaped from the Juvenile Detention Center.
Mississippi.
There was chaos inside of that facility.
And Hawaii.
The escape happened about 10:45 Wednesday morning.
Our team uncovered there are gaps with how escapes are tracked both pre and post conviction. The Interstate Compact for Juveniles is a law that regulates juveniles between states. It logs escapes only if juveniles escape from jail and cross state lines. Since 2021, 89 juveniles have escaped secure facilities in America and were found in other states. But that's a low number because if they escape and don't cross state lines, that number is not tracked. Another entity, the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, told us it does not track escapes. So we filed a series of requests with all 50 states trying to get their escape data. More than half responded. Most escapes happen from state-run juvenile facilities. Of those from 2021 to 2023, the data shows Louisiana reported 61 total, followed by Michigan, Iowa, Oregon, and Nevada. For Everton, she felt re-traumatized each time Cade committed new crimes with no way to control him. She wrote to her state lawmakers demanding a fix, but not much has been done. She's hoping another family doesn't experience her pain as she recognizes transforming a complex juvenile system is impossible overnight.
Our situation is a very prime example of why this is not working. I can tell you that something has to change. It has to change.
Xavier Cade's defense lawyers claimed he was mentally ill and in crisis when he went on his crime sprees.
They claim that his age prevented him from understanding right from wrong and are trying to have his conviction tossed out.
Some experts say part of the problem with juveniles escaping is the need for incarceration at all. In the 1970s, Missouri dramatically changed its approach to the juvenile justice system by turning jails into therapeutic, group-like settings. Their facilities resemble schools rather than prisons.
There was buy-in from the legislators, the judges, all those people, and again, they knew it worked.
Mark Stewart helped launch the Missouri model for juvenile justice, which has been praised around the nation, particularly because the rate of reincarceration is much lower using this method. But Stewart explains the push to implement something successful in Missouri has been met with challenges in other states.
So it's kind of like a stool without having all four legs on it. If you do one or two or even three, you're not going to get it done.
You can find more information about escape rates in your state on InvestigateTV.com. Just search unsupervised. Coming up next, an in-depth look at what triggers harmful algae blooms and why scientists say these outbreaks could plague our shorelines for another decade.
Then later, a gift from the 1940s sparks a lifelong passion.
I negotiated with Dorothy. I said, you can have anything in that house you want, but I got to have a training room in the basement. I didn't get it big enough.
How one man's family inspired him to build a miniature town that's keeping the golden age of railroads alive.
Our in-depth coverage continues. You can get connected to Investigate TV Plus on all social media platforms.
They infuse bright colors into aquatic environments, but when toxic algae blooms occur, they can quickly put a community's water supply at risk.
Algae are microscopic organisms that live in all types of water. Blooms occur when environmental conditions like warmer temperatures or fertilizer-rich runoff fuel its rapid growth.
In the last 15 years, reports of harmful algae blooms in the U.S. have increased. According to the Environmental Working Group, in 2010, there were fewer than 100 news reports related to algae blooms. In 2019, that number peaked at more than 500.
Some locations see frequent blooms, including Lake Erie, where in July 2014, toxic algae got into Toledo, Ohio's water supply. 500,000 people were told not to drink the water for an entire weekend. It was the first time toxic algae made tap water unsafe to drink in a U.S. city.
In the decades since, Toledo's invested millions of dollars to update storm and wastewater infrastructure. But there's a practice that's proven harder to control.
Reporter Sean Hegarty has an in-depth look at what fuels toxic algae blooms and what's being done to prevent more outbreaks.
On the shores of Put-in Bay, Ohio State Stone Lab research students sample Lake Erie. These samples will be analyzed and scrutinized, looking to learn more about one thing: algae.
Are you shocked that you're still out here talking about algae?
No, I mean 10 years is not a long time in terms of turning the algae problem around, so I'm not surprised that we're still out here.
We're on the water with University of Toledo Lake Erie Center Director Dr. Tom Bridgman. He studied Lake Erie algae 10 years before the water crisis, before many understood what was happening out here.
We've learned a lot about dealing with the blooms, but we haven't made a lot of progress in preventing them in the first place.
Is that frustrating?
That's frustrating because that's something we have control of. We could prevent these blooms if we really wanted to.
Fuel for the bloom comes from nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen coming from a variety of places, including farm field runoff after increasingly heavy storms recently. There is some good news on that front.
The phosphorus concentrations in the river have plateaued over the last 10 years. We want them to go down. We're still about roughly twice as high as our target that we want to be.
Justin Chaffin, research coordinator at Stone Lab, is encouraged that nutrient levels that make the bloom grow are not increasing. Ideally, they'd be going down quicker. Legacy phosphorus, that also makes this complicated as well.
If you stop all phosphorus applications, if it's fertilizer or manure or sewage, there's lots of land out there that will still leak phosphorus.
You might have phosphorus that got out there 15 years ago that might still be working its way through the system.
Or decades ago.
The solutions don't just happen here in the lake itself. They happen back through the source, through the Maumee River. And that is a tall order as well. The Maumee River watershed extends as far back as Fort Wayne, Indiana. As that source solution takes shape, more is known about algae than ever before. Monitoring and predictions are much more timely. Researchers are also focused on a bloom's makeup, and maybe more importantly, what makes it toxic. Plus, we now know that blooms are susceptible to viruses.
Probably part of the 2014 water crisis was because there was a virus in the lake that attacked the algae and caused it to break open, and that toxin was released into the water and got through the water treatment plant.
Water treatment is as good as it's ever been. Dr. Bridgman has no concern about that. The bloom, though, persists, and it will until the source, phosphorus and nitrogen, stay out of the water. If you and I are sitting out here in the next 10 years, what do you think we're going to be looking at? What do you think we'll be seeing?
I think that we'll still have blooms in 10 years. Hopefully they are reduced. Hopefully they are maybe half as big on average as they are now. That would be my hope. I don't think we're going to eradicate them in 10 years unless we have a major change to the way we manage our watershed.
10 years from now, I would hope there'd be less phosphorus getting in the river. We're able to keep it on the fields when we have heavy storms. And I would hope that would lead to less bloom in the lake.
Researchers say it takes about 2.5 years for Lake Erie to cycle through water, so if those nutrient levels decrease, algae blooms would resolve in a relatively short period of time.
From the brink of blindness to becoming a basketball mentor.
Kids try to show you up a little bit.
How a coach's journey highlights a critical need for organ donors. You can watch Investigate TV Plus anytime, streaming online. Get the app for Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. They're free to download.
Hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. are waiting for an organ transplant.
And African Americans make up the largest minority group in need of a donation. In 2021, just 28% of Black people on the national waiting list received a transplant, as opposed to 48% of white people on that same list. Experts say living organ donations can help bridge that gap.
Reporter Shelby Roberts introduces us to a transplant recipient in South Carolina who's using her story to encourage others to give the gift of life.
Angela Pickney Hall has played basketball for as long as she can remember.
I used to get in trouble all the time because I never used to make it home before the street light came on.
The Utahville native is the women's basketball coach here at Cross High School, teaching her passion to her young players.
Kids, they try to show you up a little bit. I'm like, all right, now I might be old, but I ain't gonna let you do too much, you know.
But Angela's vision for life took a dramatic turn her junior year of college.
Started even harder to see, much less play basketball with. And, you know, you think you're seeing one thing. You're trying to shoot for the middle, but you got two others on the other side.
It wasn't until after she graduated that she learned what was actually happening to her eyes.
I went to a doctor here, and he told me I have keratoconus. That's where the bulging of the cornea is bulging. It's like a cone shape.
Angela had two options: ultimately go blind or get another shot at life. After wrestling with the decision for about a decade, Angela chose to move forward with a cornea transplant.
And I'm gaining a second chance. So I am eternally grateful.
While Angela got her transplant, there are many others whose futures are in flux, particularly in communities of color.
In South Carolina, there's over 1,700 people waiting for the gift of life, and over 65% of those are within multicultural communities.
Crystal Coe is the Director of Communications for We Are Sharing Hope SC. The agency facilitates organ, eye, and tissue donations in South Carolina. The group's goal is to educate communities of color about what it means to be a donor, while also dispelling myths and offering preventative health care resources.
For families, it is a way for their loved one during a really difficult time of their life, when they say yes to the gift, that they're given a little piece of hope.
Hope for people like Angela.
Changed me to the point to be a better person than I was before.
Black people in the U.S. are 3 times as likely to develop kidney failure than white people, but researchers find they are less likely to receive a life-saving transplant. In fact, a majority of people on the national waiting list are in need of a kidney.
Advocates say that living organ donors can be a critical part of the solution to shorten the wait, but they often face indirect cost that can discourage others from signing up to be living donors.
For example, will I, if I'm a donor, have a harder time than I otherwise would getting life insurance or disability insurance, or in some cases even health insurance? Will I have to pay out of my pocket, take money from my family in order to do this good thing for somebody else?
You can learn more about the need for donors and the push for protections on InvestigateTV.com. Just search Living Organ Donations.
Up next, a meticulously crafted model train set transports people back in time.
It's a little chunk of real life in about 1957.
Meet the grandfather who's turned his hobby into a way to honor his family.
About an hour north of Charlotte, North Carolina, there's a farm where you're just as likely to hear a train whistle as a cow moo.
Reporter John Carter shows us how a lifelong passion for steam engines inspired one man to build a miniature town.
Harry Jenkins lives on a sprawling 199-acre cattle farm in Vail. It's known as the 4J farm. The 4J is for Mr. Jenkins and his 3 sons, who all live here as well. Working a cattle farm takes up most of Mr. Jenkins' time. But when he isn't tending to his cattle, he's tending to the train station, the one inside his home.
I negotiated with Dorothy. I said, you can have anything in that house you want, but I got to have a train room in the basement. I didn't get it big enough.
Dorothy is Mr. Jenkins' wife, and this is the train room he and she negotiated back when they built this house in 2000. There may be other bigger model train setups, but Mr. Jenkins has what many consider the most intricate and detailed model train display in the Carolinas.
It's more than trains. That layout to me is it's a little chunk of real life in about 1957.
It's a hobby first introduced to him by his father back in the 1940s. In fact, Mr. Jenkins still has that first train he ever got.
I don't have any idea what Dad paid for these. I don't know how much he paid for that. That's a 1949 model. It runs as good as anything out there.
There are 9 full trains on the layout. 6 of them can run at one time. There's a highway where cars and trucks pass by. And then there are the other scenes, the stockyard, the depot, the fairgrounds, the businesses, the village where each business is named after his 9 grandchildren, plus a tribute to his father, who for years worked building transmission towers.
That tower's finished, this one's half made, and there'll be a transmission line going through here.
There was a time in years past when you could find model trains in just about any store. These days, it's mostly specialty shops.
Really, it really is an old man's hobby, and I understand that. Children, there's too much for children now. They don't get excited when they hear a train whistle 4 or 5 miles away, and you go to see it go past because of a steam engine. They used to do that years ago. You don't do that anymore.
But when you look at this magnificent display, you can only feel it could still inspire a young person to carry on the tradition. After all, Mr. Jenkins says there's still a lot of work to be done.
It'll never be finished. And I've heard a lot of old people say that, you know. And the reason it's not, you'll always stumble upon something that's a little different than what you got, that you could add, or a little better than what you got that you could add. Or so much better that you want to take something you've got away and put this in its place.
What a nice visit to a little town. It felt real.
I mean, it looks real. It's impressive. I wonder what his wife thinks of it now, though, when she gave him permission to use that room.
Well, that's his space.
That is his space. She may not even go in there. You
Probably
never know.
not.
All right.
Well, that's going to do it for us on Investigate TV Plus. I'm T. Chappelle.
And I'm Lee Zurich. Thanks for watching. On the next Investigate TV Plus, traffic fines designed to raise city revenue.
Those tickets paid for the car, paid for my salary, paid for the maintenance of the vehicle.
2 former police officers share insight into how a city deployed its police department to bolster its budgets.